He faked a coma to expose betrayal, but when a quiet nurse whispered a secret she thought no one could hear, everything changed. What she confessed didn't just save his life, it ignited a revolution. Beneath the sterile golden light of the presidential suite at Ridgefield Private Medical Center, Kane Everhart lay motionless. To the world, he was a 40-year-old black tech billionaire comatose after a mysterious private jet explosion. But inside, within each carefully timed breath, each precisely measured heartbeat, he was listening and remembering. They called Kane a silent genius. He built Everhart Dynamics from nothing, from ideas rejected 1,000 times. But today, the very people closest to him were plotting to steal everything he had bled to build. What they didn't know was that he had woken up on the third day. What they didn't know was that he had heard every whisper behind glass doors or calculating footstep and that voice. A voice both unfamiliar and oddly familiar, but carrying a storm beneath it. "I don't belong here," she whispered, thinking no one could hear her. But Kane did, and he wouldn't forgive. Through the cracked glass door, Kane heard Claire, his wife, speaking with a voice sharp as a blade. "3 more days. The board has no choice but to vote on incapacitation." Another voice followed, cold and methodical. "Ethan, his half-brother and COO. Everything's in place. The chief doctor's already signed off. We're ready." Kane's breath remained steady, not from calm, but from the fire boiling in his chest. Claire, who once held his hand through every storm, was now leading a coup in the name of compassion. Ethan, the kid he lifted out of poverty, was now twisting a knife into his back. They thought he couldn't hear, but he did, and he remembered. The room, once a place of healing, had become a cage of betrayal. But within that stillness, Kane realized something vital. Violence was his sharpest weapon. He wouldn't strike with anger. He would strike with truth, with proof, with precision. They had no idea the man they believed to be slipping away was actually counting down, waiting for their next move. That night she entered. Lana, the new night nurse, stepped into the room with tired eyes and something else. Something Kane hadn't seen in 18 days: humanity. She didn't play sweet for the cameras. She didn't pretend. As she adjusted his IV, her voice, soft and worn, filled the silence. "You don't know me, but I know something's wrong." Kane's pulse quickened, not out of fear, but hope. "I checked your chart," she whispered, as if confessing to the shadows. "The sedative dosage is too high. Doesn't match your injury. Someone wants you kept under." She paused, then leaned closer. "I don't know who's doing this or why, but I promise I'll find out, I swear." She reached over and placed a folded paper gently on his chest. It stayed there, warm and trembling, right over his heartbeat. Kane couldn't move, but a tear slid from the corner of his eye. Not from pain, from the realization that for the first time in weeks, he wasn't alone. The next night, Kane took a risk. When Lana asked, "If you can hear me, move your finger," he gathered every ounce of strength, and just once his finger twitched. Lana gasped, hand flying to her mouth. "Oh my God, you're awake." He moved it again, twice. Their silent code had begun, 1 for yes, 2 for no. That night, a new language was born in the darkness. Lana brought in letter cards, and Kane spelled out the truth letter by letter, word by painstaking word. The first message chilled her to the bone. "They sabotaged the plane." Her voice trembled. "Who?" He tapped out 2 names: Claire, Ethan. But then came one more: Sirocco. Lana froze. Not a person, a name, a code. "What's Sirocco?" she asked, voice barely above a breath. Kane slowly spelled it out. "Clean energy for poor communities." Her eyes widened. Suddenly, this wasn't just about a power struggle. It was about something bigger. A vision someone had tried to kill. Lana stared at Kane like he had just summoned a ghost. "Sirocco. That's your top secret initiative, isn't it? I thought it was just a rumor." Kane tapped again, slower this time. "I kept it hidden, even from the board." She sat back, eyes searching his still face for something: doubt, fear, anything. But all she found was certainty. "You were going to unveil it," she said softly, "to give renewable power to communities left in the dark. And they wanted to bury it by burying you." He moved his finger once. "Yes," Lana swallowed hard. Claire and Ethan knew yes. Why, she asked, voice breaking. He spelled out: too much risk, to their profit. That night, Lana didn't cry. She sat in silence beside him, not as a nurse, not as a caretaker, but as a witness to something far bigger than herself. Outside that room, Kane Everhart was still just a silent patient. But inside, a quiet war had begun, between greed and vision. And two people had just made an unspoken pact to fight back word by word, breath by breath. The next night, Lana walked into Kane's room with red, swollen eyes. He noticed the moment she stepped in. His heart clenched not from pain, but from knowing. Someone had threatened her. She sat by the bed silent for a long moment, then gently held his hand cold from the IV, but now a lifeline connecting two souls fighting in secret. "Someone left a white envelope in my locker today," she whispered. "No words, just a photo of you, with a red X slashed across your face." Kane moved a single finger. "Are you afraid?" Lana nodded slightly, then smiled bitterly. "Yes, but I hate silence more." She pulled out a small slip of paper from her pocket and placed it on his chest, where his heart still beat stubbornly beneath layers of betrayal. "I won't let them kill you. Not silently. Not while there's still a chance you'll wake up." That night, neither of them slept. Outside, the world believed Kane Everhart was slipping away. Inside, a quiet alliance was taking shape between a man left to be and a woman who refused to walk away when it mattered most. Lana knew she needed help, and on the eighth night she brought someone new. "This is Dr. Minla," she said, her voice steady. "A forensic neurologist. He was my professor. I trust him with my life." Min stepped forward and studied Kane with sharp, practiced eyes. "I reviewed the files. Too many inconsistencies. The sedative levels are dangerously high and all authorized by one person, Chief Physician Ashton Kroll." Kane's brow twitched. Kroll, a man he once protected from a financial scandal with a single phone call. "And now this will start gathering evidence," Min said. "Microcameras document backups, audio logs. But we need your cooperation." Kane moved his finger. "Ready." That evening, a discreet camera was hidden in the bedside lamp. Audio recorders were set. The trap had been laid, not for vengeance, for truth, because Kane knew one thing. Truth, no matter how deeply buried, always finds a way back to the surface. And this time, it would be heard. The next morning, inside Everhart Dynamics' executive boardroom, Ethan stood before the board with a rehearsed look of concern. "Jerome's condition has deteriorated," he said solemnly. "We need to activate the incapacitation clause for the company's stability." Claire sat beside him, dressed in chic morning black, dabbing dry eyes with a silk handkerchief. The performance was flawless. No one knew that every word was being recorded, transmitted directly to a hard drive in Kane's hospital room, where Min and Lana sat with headphones on, hearts pounding. "He won't recover," Ethan continued. "Dr. Kroll has already signed the report." Kane's fingers clenched into a faint fist. This wasn't shock anymore. It was disgust. "It's time," Lana whispered. "We need to bring Elise back." Kane blinked once. Yes, Elise Donovan, the sharp, fearless lawyer who once stood behind Kane through every merger, every hostile bid. Framed by Ethan and Claire, discredited and exiled. They thought she was gone. But no one disappears, not when justice still owes them a voice. 3 days later, Elise appeared at Kane's door in a slate gray suit, simple, precise. Her eyes were sharper than ever, burning with resolve. "Hello, Kane," she said calmly. "I heard you woke up, and that you were betrayed." He blinked. "Yes." Lana quickly caught her up, videos, audio, forged prescriptions, even hallway footage of Ethan bribing Dr. Kroll. Elise sat by Kane's side and sighed deeply. "I used to believe justice needed a voice, but maybe it just needs a steady gaze and a finger that twitches." She opened her laptop and began typing fast and focused. "Here's the plan. The evidence will be unveiled in front of the entire board on Monday. They think you're weak, Kane, but they've forgotten our weakest moments often hold our greatest strength." For the first time in 3 weeks, Kane smiled. Not at the downfall of his enemies, but at the hope returning to the room. Because Elise was back, and this time she was on alone. Day 21. The day the board would vote on Kane's incapacitation. It was also the day Kane Everhart walked into the room. Gasps froze in the air. Ethan, mid-sentence, choked on his own words. Claire dropped her water glass. Dr. Kroll's face drained white. Kane walked slowly, a cane supporting each deliberate step. Behind him were Lana, Elise, and Min, his trinity of truth. Sorry I'm late, Kane said, voice hoarse but unwavering. I've just returned from the dead. He placed a USB drive on the table. And I brought souvenirs. The screen behind him lit up. Videos, audio files, emails, bank records, every line, every plot, every betrayal laid bare. Ethan stammered. These are doctored, fabricated. Then what about the offshore accounts? Elise countered. Or your voice ordering increased sedation? There was no reply. Only silence, the same silence Kane had endured. Now it would become justice. The boardroom thickened with silence. All eyes were fixed on the screen where Ethan's voice, clear and unmistakable, played on loop. Increase the sedatives. Make sure he never wakes up. Once the power transfer is complete, we can let nature take its course. Lana reached under the table and gently squeezed Kane's hand. Once cold and lifeless, it now trembled, not from weakness, but from long-buried rage. Elise didn't need to say much. Every file she laid down hit like a gavel. Fake prescriptions, wire transfers, secret meetings with Kroll. Claire no longer played the weeping widow. She screamed, "You really think they'll believe a barely recovered patient? A night nurse? A neurologist without state credentials?" Min stepped forward. "My license was reinstated this morning, and every report has already been submitted to federal authorities." Claire froze. Ethan bolted. Kane didn't move. He didn't need to. This wasn't a chase. It was a reckoning. And justice, though late, had finally arrived in the form of undeniable truth. Ethan ran. But at the elevator, two federal officers waited. Ethan Reed Everhart. One announced, "You're under arrest for conspiracy to commit murder, financial fraud, and falsification of medical documents." He thrashed. "You don't understand. I held this company together. I am the future of Everhart Dynamics." Kane slowly approached. His eyes weren't angry. They were tired of betrayal, of noise, of excuses. "I took you in," Kane said, voice low. "I raised you out of nothing, and you tried to erase me for a board seat." Ethan faltered. For the first time, shame crept into his face. But it was too late. Claire slumped in her chair, saying nothing as officers approached. No more fake tears. No more performances. "It's over," Elise whispered beside Kane. But he shook his head. "Not yet. We still have Sirocco." Because this wasn't just about his survival. It was about what they tried to kill, an idea that threatened everything they feared. And it was time to turn that idea into a revolution. 1 week later, a massive press conference took place in the city's main plaza. Thousands gathered. Reporters buzzed. Flashbulbs exploded like fireworks. Kane Everhart stood tall, not as a man returning from tragedy, but as a man on a mission. "While I lay in that bed," he began, "I learned more than I ever did in 20 years of running this company. I learned that power without principle is the most dangerous thing in the world." The crowd held its breath. "And today I'm not just returning, I'm here to finish what they tried to bury, Project Sirocco." Behind him, a giant screen lit up a map of underserved communities across the country where electricity was either unaffordable or non-existent. Sirocco will bring clean, low-cost energy to 5 million households over the next 3 years. 60% of profits will be reinvested into community-run funds. Kane turned to Lana, who stood just off stage. "She's the reason I'm here today. Not medicine, not machines. Her." The audience erupted, but Kane's eyes didn't leave Lana's, because this wasn't about applause. It was about gratitude for the whisper that woke him and the courage that kept him alive. After the announcement, Kane brought Lana and Elise to the new headquarters of the Everhart Lumen Foundation. At the entrance, a slab of obsidian stone bore an inscription, "True light doesn't come from a switch. It comes from the courage to strike it in the dark." Beneath the quote were 3 names: Kane Everhart, Elise Donovan, Lana Wolf. Lana stopped in her tracks. "I don't deserve this." Kane smiled gently, the way only someone who had faced death could. "No one's perfect, but you stood up when no one else did." Elise laughed softly. "When I was close to giving up, you lit the match." Lana reached out and touched her name on the stone. Her eyes welled up, not from pain, but from being seen. For once, she wasn't just a night nurse. She was part of something larger. Not all heroes wear suits. Some walk hospital halls, whisper to unconscious men, and risk everything with nothing to gain. And tonight, that truth was carved into stone. In the days that followed, Kane visited the research lab every afternoon, quietly observing young engineers refine the next generation of Sirocco systems. One evening, Lana sat beside him, sipping tea. Her eyes scanned the data on the screen, but her voice revealed something deeper. Do you ever wonder, if we went too far, these people were challenging. They don't lose quietly. Kane gazed out the glass wall toward the skyline, burning gold with sunset. What's right or wrong isn't always in the law. Sometimes it's in your heartbeat. He turned to her. And you, the woman who once trembled over a white envelope, have more courage than any CEO I've ever met. Lana chuckled. I've never taken a single business course. No, Kane said. But you taught me what no Ivy League ever could. Conscience is the most profitable investment. They sat in silence, sharing the sunset. No suits, no boardrooms, just two people who had crawled out of the abyss, now rebuilding a world from what others tried to destroy. Because in that room under fading light, they didn't need titles. They had trust. That evening, Elise waited in Kane's office, her face unreadable. She handed him a thick envelope with a red border official, ominous. Elijah Moran, she said softly. Chairman of Global Energy Consortium. He wants a private meeting. Kane looked up. That name, Moran, the very man who once mocked Sirocco as a charity disguised as a tech fairy tale, now reaching out. He knows we've rattled the system, Elise added. He's not coming to talk. He's coming to warn. The meeting was scheduled at a discreet hotel. No cameras, no entourage. Just two men, one built on legacy, the other on survival. As Kane walked into the soundproof room, Elijah Moran greeted him with a smile too polished to be sincere. This world doesn't run on ideals, Moran said. It runs on control. Kane didn't flinch. Then I'm your worst nightmare, because I believe in trust. Moran slid a folder across the table. $9 billion. We buy Sirocco outright. You get a ceremonial title and a lifetime of applause. Kane didn't touch it. You think I crawled back from death to sell my soul, Moran stared. And in that silence, Kane smiled not from arrogance but clarity. You've just given me another reason to keep going. The room was sleek, quiet, dangerously civilized. Moran leaned forward. You see, Kane, it's not just you. You're threatening entire ecosystems, financial ones. Do you really believe goodwill powers the world? Kane folded his hands calmly. No. But I believe fear doesn't have to. He stood slowly. The folder remained untouched. This is your answer, Kane said. No price, no title, no leash. Moran's voice sharpened. Walk away from this and you'll regret it. Kane's smile faded. You already do. That night, Kane didn't sleep. Neither did Lana. The next morning, news broke of fire at the pilot Sirocco installation. No deaths, but total destruction. The electrical grid melted, command boards torched. Sprayed on the wall in red paint. Stop now, Lana read the headline, hands trembling. They're not just warning anymore. They're declaring war. Kane read the words over and over, but when he finally looked up, it wasn't fear in his eyes. It was resolve. Then it's time we show them what it means. When people fight with something they can't buy. 3 days after Moran's threat, the heart of Sirocco's test zone burned. No suspects, no fingerprints, just heat ashes and a message scrawled in rage, back off. Lana held the tablet, tightly scrolling through the footage. The smoldering remains of the control tower flickered on screen, cables shredded, solar panels shattered like glass dreams. Kane stood behind her, silent. Min entered with Elise. This wasn't vandalism, Min said. It was surgical, intentional, and funded. We need to go public, Elise urged. All of it. Kane nodded. The time for silence had passed. That evening, Kane appeared in a live broadcast viewed by over 10 million people. Someone out there is afraid, he said. Afraid of light, and they've chosen the coward's path, destruction. He paused, letting the weight of his words settle. But I have news for them. You can burn hardware, but you can't burn hope. He leaned closer to the camera. Because the spark that lit Sirocco didn't come from machines. It came from people. And for the first time, the world listened not to a CEO, but to a survivor who chose purpose over profit. The destruction of the Sirocco test zone sent shockwaves across the country. But what happened next, no one expected. The very community affected by the attack rose up. Without being asked, they rebuilt. Residents pooled their savings, brought in tools, worked late into the night. Volunteers came from neighboring towns. People who had never met stood shoulder to shoulder, wiring new grids, reinstalling panels. A boy no older than 10 stood before a news camera, holding a cardboard sign. Mr. Kane gave us light. Now we'll protect it. Lana watched through tears. This is why we can't stop. Kane placed a hand on her shoulder. They're not protecting panels. They're protecting the feeling of being seen. Elise burst in, eyes wide. You won't believe it. Former investors, the ones who abandoned us, they're coming back, begging to be included. They don't want to miss history. Kane smiled, not because they believe in us, but because they're afraid to be left behind. For the first time, Sirocco wasn't a project, it was a movement. And movements don't burn, they rise. The reactivation ceremony took place right where the flames had been. No stage, no fanfare. Just families in folding chairs and new solar lights blinking like stars reborn. Kane stood before them, no teleprompter, no armor. Not long ago, I was called a man on life support, he began. Unable to move, barely breathing, left to be forgotten. He paused, scanning the crowd. But I heard every whisper, every betrayal, and one voice that refused to stay silent. He looked at Lana standing just beyond the lights. She believed in me when I had no strength to believe in myself. Then he turned to the community. And now I believe in you, because I see it, the courage, the fire, the refusal to go dark again. The crowd rose in thunderous applause. Children chanted Sirocco, Sirocco as the new grid flickered on. Kane stood still, eyes misted. He hadn't just woken from a coma. He had come alive. And this time the world was watching. That night, as the celebration faded and the lights of the newly revived grid glowed over rooftops, Kane returned to his office. Elise was already there, a file folder in her hands, and a look that said everything. She placed it on his desk. Moran's being investigated, but it goes deeper, much deeper. Inside were names, dozens of them, CEOs, lobbyists, former senators, heads of legacy energy corporations. It wasn't just about taking you down, Elise said. It was about stopping Sirocco before it ever became a threat. Kane stared at the list in silence. This wasn't corporate sabotage. It was systemic, a network built on keeping the poor in the dark, literally. Do we confront them? Elise asked. Kane's eyes didn't leave the page. No, he said quietly. We outgrow them. Elise frowned. That's not how you win. Kane looked up. It is, when you're not playing their game. Because this wasn't about vengeance anymore. It was about evolution. The kind you couldn't buy, bully or burn. And Kane knew light didn't need to fight darkness. It just needed to keep shining. 2 months later, the Everhart Lumen Global Center opened in New Orleans. No ribbon cutting, no media circus, just a switch. And thousands of solar lights flickered on in low-income neighborhoods that had been ignored for decades. Kane stood in the courtyard, surrounded by children chasing shadows that no longer lingered. He wore a plain white shirt, no security, no podium, just presence. Lana stood beside him. You did it. Kane turned to her, voice steady. We did. Elise smiled from across the plaza, arms folded, watching it all unfold with the quiet pride of someone who had been there when it almost didn't happen. This building isn't just a headquarters, Kane told Lana. It's a monument to a single idea that you don't have to be perfect, to choose what's right. And for the first time in his life, he wasn't speaking as a CEO. He was speaking as a man who had once been silenced and chose to speak not with noise, but with action. And above them, the lights continued to burn, powered by the sun, but lit by something far more powerful, trust. That night, Kane sat alone in front of his mirror. He slowly removed his shirt, revealing the scar along his temple, the only physical reminder of the explosion that almost erased him. Some had suggested surgery. PR teams said it made him look too human. But he'd kept it, because every time he saw it, he remembered the moment of impact, the betrayal that followed, and the quiet whisper, I'll save you even if it costs me everything. A knock at the door. Lana. She held 2 mugs of hot cocoa. Tonight marks 100 days since you opened your eyes. Kane smiled faintly. I'm still learning how to see the world again. It's changed, she said. He shook his head. No. I changed, and somehow the world followed. They clinked their mugs together gently. No victory parade, no red carpet, Just two people who had faced death and chose to build life anyway. In the reflection, Kane didn't just see a survivor. He saw a story no one could silence, and a scar that no one could rewrite. The next morning, Kane stood on stage at the university that once denied him a scholarship because he lacked leadership potential. Now he was there as a keynote speaker. The auditorium was filled with first-generation students, immigrants, and kids from forgotten zip codes just like him. People often ask me why I didn't go after those who tried to destroy me, he said. He paused. Because revenge ends with one mean win, but legacy lives through others. He pointed to the audience. You are my answer. You are the proof. The applause was thunderous, not for the words, but for the weight behind them. Because Kane wasn't preaching theory. He was showing what it looked like to build from the ashes. As he stepped off stage, dozens reached out to shake his hand, not because he was rich, but because he was real. And for the first time, he didn't feel like a man returning from near death. He felt like a bridge between what was and what could be. 1 year had passed since Kane Everhart opened his eyes. Sirocco had expanded to 12 countries. The Everhart Lumen Foundation had funded over 300 scholarships, and millions had flipped on lights powered by a vision once nearly buried. That night, Kane, Lana, Elise, and Min sat on the rooftop of Lumen HQ. Each held a paper lantern, one for every city that had gone bright. They said light was just electricity, Lana whispered. But it's more than that, Kane replied. It's proof that even when they try to extinguish you, if you carry purpose, they can't touch you. He looked at her eyes softer now. You remember what you said to me? When you thought I couldn't hear, Lana smiled, voice trembling. I didn't need to be heard. I just needed it to reach your heart. And it had, far deeper than sound ever could. Above them, hundreds of lanterns rose into the sky, each one glowing, each one proof that even in silence, some things refused to die. And for the first time, that light had a name. Kane, Lana, Sirocco. Hope. True power isn't found in boardrooms or billion-dollar contracts. It's found in the quiet courage to stand for what's right when no one is watching. Sometimes the most life-changing words are whispered, not shouted. And the most lasting legacies are built not on revenge, but on purpose.